There are also a whole host of other glands that are part of the endocrine system, but not necessarily directly controlled by the hypothalamus pituitary system. Or possibly they are parts of other organs, and so are not primarily classified as endocrine glands, even though they have some endocrine functionality. Here we'll discuss those. First, we have the parathyroid glands. If you've studied the skeleton and the hormonal regulation of the skeleton, these should be familiar to you. The parathyroid glands produce parathyroid hormone, which is one of the primary regulators of blood calcium levels and bone resorption and remodeling. The parathyroid glands are found on the back of the thyroid at basically the four corners. The thyroid itself looks kind of like a butterfly with two big wings connected in the middle. You find the parathyroid on the posterior surface, and there are four of them. One in the upper left, one in the upper right, one in the lower left, one in the lower right. While they are attached to the thyroid, they're definitely different tissue than the thyroid. Parathyroid glands are made primarily, or at least the primary hormone-secreting cell in them, are what are called chief cells. These are the cells that make and release parathyroid hormone. The effects of parathyroid hormone are to stimulate calcium entrance and maintenance in the blood. It raises blood calcium levels. It does this by producing, parathyroid hormone stimulates rank L secretion by osteoblasts. Rank L then stimulates the formation of osteoclasts. And so let me just sort of put this in here. Parathyroid hormone stimulates rank L. Rank L stimulates osteoclasts. And osteoclasts resorb bone, which increases blood calcium. It also, to a lesser extent, stimulates the reabsorption of calcium and the secretion of phosphate in the kidneys. This is because you don't want to lose all of that calcium that you just tore apart your bones to get into your blood. And you also don't want it to just recrystallize back onto the bone. Calcium on the bone is found in the form of hydroxyapatite, which is primarily calcium phosphate. By getting rid of the phosphate in the urine while maintaining the calcium, you basically prevent the calcium from being able to recrystallize on the bones, keeping it in the blood. Parathyroid hormone also inhibits osteoblast secretion of collagen. Osteoblast secretion of collagen is a primary step in the making of new bone. The pancreas. The pancreas is a dual organ. We will study it primarily when we study the digestive system. And certainly most of the tissue of the pancreas is devoted to the synthesis and maintenance of digestive enzymes. It's very definitely a gland, but most of its glandular nature is exocrine, secreting into the lumen of the intestines, which is technically outside the body. So you're secreting through a duct into the lumen of the intestines, and that's an exocrine gland role. You're not secreting hormones, you're secreting enzymes. But the pancreas does contain within its tissue numerous what are called pancreatic islets, also called islets of Langerhans. There's sort of a movement in medical terminology to move away from terms that are named after the discoverer, like islets of Langerhans, or Bowman's capsule or something like that, because they're not very descriptive. And towards having descriptive terms, like instead of islets of Langerhans, they're pancreatic islets, which at least tells you something about where you're going to find them. For better or worse, you kind of live in this period of transition where pretty much everyone who's older than you and largely is going to be training you and is your superior was trained on the old terminology, and you're being kind of expected to use the new terminology with the people that you will train in the future, so you get to learn both. Yay, you. But the pancreatic islets consist of three main types of endocrine gland cells. Alpha are one of them. So alpha cells, or A cells, release glucagon. Glucagon is released when blood sugar levels are low. And it regulates primarily the liver. It tells the liver to release glucose stored from glycogen through a process called glycogenolysis. So let's put that in here. Glycogenolysis literally just means the cutting of glycogen. You cut glycogen up, you end up with glucose. It gets into the blood. Right? So if you got low blood sugar, release the sugar. It also tells your liver to make more glucose. Basically, it can take energy from, say, stored fat or protein and use that energy to make sugar. Because there are certain parts of your body, most notably your neurons, of the central nervous system, that don't use fuels other than sugar. So if you take energy and use it to make new glucose, which you then export, this is called gluconeogenesis. Genesis is creation, neo means new, gluco is glucose, sugar. So it's the creation of new sugar, which is what it is. In addition, glucagon stimulates fat catabolism in adipose tissue. It causes you to release fat stores. And either, typically because fats don't travel in the blood very well, they're very hydrophobic, the adipose tissue will turn the fat into ketones before exporting them into the blood. Those ketones can be used directly by some cells, and the liver can also convert them to glucose through the process of gluconeogenesis. So that's one hormone released by the pancreatic islets. The alpha cells produce glucagon, which releases energy. There's a second type of cell called beta cells. Beta cells release insulin. And these are probably the more famous cells because these are the cells that get destroyed in cases of type 1 diabetes. Insulin is released in response to high blood sugar. And it tells, honestly, most of the cells of the body to begin absorbing glucose. And it says, hey, this is a good time to replenish your energy stores, absorb glucose. There's plenty of glucose in the blood. It has particular effects on the liver, where it tells the liver to take that glucose that it has just absorbed and store it as glycogen in glycogenesis, the creation of glycogen, or glycogen synthesis. But it talks to pretty much all other cells as well. There are some cells that don't require insulin in order to grab glucose from the blood. Your brain tissue, liver, kidneys, and red blood cells are all extremely metabolically active, highly intensive, and they don't want to die. So they'll grab sugar from the bloodstream no matter what. But pretty much all of your other cells wait for insulin to tell them, hey, now's a good time to grab some energy. The delta cells, which are fairly rare and actually difficult to distinguish, they release somatostatin. Somatostatin, you may recall, because it is also a hypothalamic hormone. Somatostatin suppresses both glucagon and insulin. It's kind of a neutralizer. It says, we are neither at a high energy nor low energy state. Just don't do nothing. It also inhibits nutrient digestion and absorption, which prolongs the absorption of nutrients. It says to basically the blood vessels of the mostly small intestine, hey, hold off on digesting that food. We don't need energy right now, but we might later. And it inhibits growth hormone, thus lowering your metabolism, thyroid stimulating hormone, and prolactin from the anterior pituitary. Somatostatin is a general metabolic inhibitor. It's going to basically cause you to go into a sort of hibernative state. It's less important in humans than it is in some other mammals that do like hibernation as kind of a lifestyle choice. But even in humans, it's something that you find released, say, when you're asleep. And like, you certainly don't need to be making insulin because you didn't just eat anything, and you don't need to do a whole lot of gluconeogenesis because your metabolic needs are suppressed, largely by somatostatin. The pineal gland. Pineal gland is also part of the central nervous system. It's a main part of one of the three areas of the midbrain. The midbrain consists of the thalamus here in the center, the hypothalamus, this triangular region which the pituitary is attached to, and way at the back there's this teeny tiny region back here called the epithalamus, which primarily consists of the pineal gland. We don't have a very good notion of what the pineal gland does. It secretes melatonin. We know that. Melatonin is made from serotonin. It seems to be made in response to, or I should say, it is made when there is a lack of sensory stimulation on the eyes. So it's made at higher levels when things go dark, and it seems to play a role in maintaining circadian rhythms. So we're not diurnal species, and so for us, melatonin builds up in the absence of light and seems to send a signal to the brain that it's time to go to sleep. In nocturnal animals, it has an opposite regulatory state. This is why people who have trouble sleeping, due to modern society, it doesn't get dark about an hour or two before you want to go to bed, like it, say, used to. But rather, most of us even have lights blaring into our eyes from our phones well into after we've turned off the light in the bedroom. Melatonin may also influence puberty timing in humans. Exactly how that works? Not terribly well understood. But we do know that the pineal gland begins to atrophy after puberty and seems to become much less functional at that point. It is located pretty much right in the center of the brain. So it probably does something important, but who knows? The thymus. So the thymus. The thymus is located slightly superior to the heart. Let me put this in blue here. All right, slightly superior to the heart and inferior to the thyroid. The thyroid is found basically right around where your Adam's apple is if you're male. The thymus would be found at the very top of your breastbone. Basically the cardiac notch, which is where your collarbones connect to the sternum, would be about right there, and the thymus is located right behind that upper part of the sternum. The thymus is another dual functionary gland. It plays a role in 3 systems: the endocrine system, the lymphatic system, and the immune system. Now, the lymphatic system and the immune system are basically the same. The lymphatic system's, one of its 2 main jobs is to run and coordinate the immune system. The lymphatic/immune system and endocrine system have a lot of intersection because your immune system is spread throughout your entire body, and it's all about communication. Different white blood cells have to communicate with each other about what infections are going on, how to attack them, who knows how to attack them properly, how the fight is going, things like that. So lots and lots of information gets swapped back and forth. How does it get swapped back and forth? Mostly through hormones. The thymus, in particular, is a primary lymphatic organ, which means that it is where a special type of white blood cell called T cells mature. T cells come in 2 varieties, helper and cytotoxic, and they're both very important in maintaining what's called your specific immune system, which is the part of your immune system that learns how to fight off disease. People with a diminished thymus, with a thymus that is smaller than it should be, tend to be immunocompromised. In fact, your thymus will engorge and enlarge when you're undergoing active infection. It trains these T cells, and it also secretes the hormones thymopoietin, thymosin, and thymulin, which are going to coordinate the activity of T lymphocytes, which are T cells, as well as stimulate the development of new lymphocytes, new white blood cells, in your bone marrow, which is where they're all made. Your gonads. These are definitely a a set of organs that are highly regulated by the pituitary hypothalamic axis. As we saw, GnRH stimulates the release of follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which have effects on the gonads. Dramatically different effects in female gonads versus male gonads. I saved them for this other category because we're going to study them in much greater detail in the chapter on reproduction. Because that is where they are, that's where they really shine. Those, like the gonads, are both major endocrine organs as well as reproductive organs in that they make gametes, sperm and ova. As most people are probably aware, the testes are gonads in phenotypic males, whereas the ovaries are gonads in phenotypic females, at least most of the time. As we'll see when we study reproduction, there are some interesting hormonal disorders that can result in females with testes and males with ovaries on some occasions. Ovaries secrete estradiol, progesterone, and inhibin. Generally, they secrete estradiol more in response to FSH and progesterone more in response to LH, but there's some crosstalk there. And both estradiol and progesterone are very important hormones in regulating both the female sexual cycle as well as female sexual development. Inhibin is plays a lesser role and is involved in states where you need to inhibit, I believe, FSH without stopping LH, as happens often during, say, pregnancy. In the testes secrete testosterone, mostly, some estrogen, and estrogen is a class of sex hormones, like estrogens versus androgens. Testosterone is the most abundant androgen, and estrogen, or estradiol, is the most abundant estrogen, at least in females. Also inhibin and some other androgens. In males, FSH is going to stimulate sperm production and the development of the male reproductive system. LH is going to stimulate testosterone production, and testosterone production also affects, well, all sorts of things. It affects neural development, it affects the male sexual development and progression through adolescence and puberty, and it is essential to the process of developing mature sperm. And there's like a whole ton of other things that kind of come into this, right? Not going to go over them all. When they become relevant, I'll bring them up, but just to give you a little bit of a taste, your skin has some endocrine functionality in that it converts cholesterol-like steroid into vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is further processed into calcitriol, which is a calcium-regulating hormone. The liver secretes a whole host of hormones and enzymes that affect hormones. Angiotensinogen, which is a precursor to a blood pressure regulator, calcidiol, which is vitamin D3 processed to the next step, erythropoietin, which is a hormone that stimulates the production of red blood cells from your bone marrow, hepcidin, which promotes intestinal absorption of iron, and insulin-like growth factor 1, which is a growth factor that's helps your standard global growth factor in some cases. Kidneys secrete calcitriol, which is like you go from the skin to the liver to the kidneys, and then the calcitriol is the final step in that hormonal process. Renin, which is technically not a hormone, but what it does is it activates angiotensinogen, turning it into angiotensin, and kidneys can also secrete erythropoietin to stimulate red blood cell production. The heart, not typically thought of as a endocrine organ, secretes one very, very important hormone, atrial natriuretic peptide. This is secreted in response to high blood pressure, which results in overstretching of the atria of the heart, and this causes you to pee. And when you pee, your blood volume goes down and your blood pressure goes down. It's a diuretic. Your stomach and small intestines secrete a whole host of hormones, including, including cholecystokinin, gastrin, ghrelin, peptide YY. These are all hormones that we're going to talk about when we talk about regulation of the digestive system.